Welcome to episode 2 of Independent Thought and Freedom. It's our first interview, in fact. I'm honored to say that our guest is the Honourable Mr. Basdeo Panday, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. To a global audience, Mr. Panday may not be very widely known, but my strong view is that he and his story should be. Basdeo Panday's life spans the 20th and 21st century. It touches on the most important global issues of his day: colonialism, decolonisation, socialism versus capitalism and the Cold War, the rise and fall of trade unionism, race relations, poverty and development, black power, African-Indian relations, the nature of political power itself. He took strong stands on these major issues for his whole life. His personal story is important for the world. He really shook things up over the span of his life. And those are the type of people I want to interview on this podcast. In many ways, he was like our Trump before Trump, especially in his relationship with the media, and we might even talk about that. But here's some of his personal background. Basdeo Panday was born on the 25th of May, 1933, to parents who were peasant farmers in St. Julian Village, a rural community about 4 miles east of Princestown. He attended the St. Julian Presbyterian Primary School, later the Presentation College, then the London School of Dramatic Art, the Lincoln's Inn, and the City of London College, where he obtained a diploma in drama, barrister at law, and a BSc in economics from London University, respectively. In 1966, he was one of the founding members of the Workers' and Farmers' Party, with CLR James as one of the founding members as well, which unsuccessfully contested the general elections of 1966. He later joined the struggles of the workers and in 1973 became the President General of the All Trinidad Sugar Estates and Factories Union, SEFWU. He became a Member of Parliament in 1976 and assumed the position of Leader of the Opposition. He was appointed Minister of External Affairs in 1986, and in 1988 he again served as the Leader of Opposition until 1995, when he became Prime Minister, a position in which he served until 2001, when he again became Leader of the Opposition until 2010. So, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Panday.
Thank you very much.
You've got a long and interesting story, and I'd really like to start at the beginning.
Sure.
With being born in Princestown in 1933. One angle I'd like to take on this is the fact that a lot of times people talk about colonialism these days, but it's something abstract. You were actually born in a colony. What was that like growing up as a colonial subject in 1933 Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, at that time and at my age, all that really mattered was survival. Mm-hmm. My parents, being peasant farmers, worked a piece of land on which they tried to raise the family. And the tradition was that you would go to primary school, and after primary school, you would go into the land and help your parents with the farming. Mm-hmm. One did not think about colonialism. One thought of survival.
Right. It was natural, was it?
It was natural. I was born into it, so we knew nothing else. Mm-hmm. So that it is when I went to college and began getting an education there, it is when I came to England, mm-hmm. I then really began to understand what colonialism was about, because I was colonial going to England in 1975 as a colonial.
No. You mean 65 or
75?
Oh, 75. Okay, 75.
57.
57, correct.
That's
Right.
1957. I worked in Trinidad and at several things as being a school teacher, a cane weigher, a magistrate's clerk, and that sort of thing.
But it's interesting because by 56, Eric Williams had become the chief minister.
Yes,
Right.
yes, so that is correct. He had formed a political party, contested the elections.
And he was anti-colonial. So, I mean, he was talked about getting rid of colonialism.
I've discovered lately that he was anti-colonial outwardly, but colonial internally.
Absolutely.
And mentally.
But at the time in 56, when he came on with that strong anti-colonial message, how did you react to that?
I didn't react to it at all. I was living in a remote village in St. Julian, right. And all of these activities were taking place in a remote place called Port of Spain.
Right.
So there was no real connection. In fact, the first connection I had was when a villager came with a card, a folded card, mm-hmm. In which there were little squares for pinpricks. Right. And he told me he was raising money for somebody about to form a political party. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you would pay. I would pay 6 pence because our money was British, right. Pound, shillings, and pence. I would give him 6 pence, and he would pierce a hole in the card as evidence that he had received it.
You know,
so
the money thing is interesting. Was it? Did you use actual British money, or was it the West Indian dollar, or what?
Was the West Indian dollar? Mm-hmm. No. A Trinidad dollar, mm-hmm. with a shilling.
Okay.
Instead of the pound, we had a dollar. But there was a shilling, there was a florin, there was a 6 pence, the 12 pence, and that sort of thing.
Okay, interesting.
So that I gave him the 6 pence, which was 12 cents.
Right.
And that's it. I thought nothing of it. Quite frankly, I didn't know what he's doing.
Do you know what party was it?
It was the party that was being formed was the PNM.
So it was the PNM. So
that was the PNM. So that was 56.
Right. So they were going in all the villages and
they were yes.
Yeah. Yes. Wow.
And getting people with little cards, folded cards with the name and so on it, trying to collect money. Right. And but then again, I left in 57.
Right.
Went to England without. I think I had $100 in my pocket, which was about 20 pounds.
Right.
But I had friends in London, mm-hmm. and they took me in, and I began.
These migration stories are interesting because I mean I had an uncle who also migrated to England around that time. You might even know him, Ralph Kisson. But yes, in the 50s, I mean the way he described the migration, he didn't know much about London. He just went. I mean, how did you even get there? How did you?
Because
what?
Because two friends from the village,
right,
had gone to London before.
Yes.
And it is because of my connection with them, I decided I would go to England and study law.
What did they write? They wrote you a letter. They returned to Trinidad. What?
No. They stayed there. I would write them letters and so on.
Okay.
And I remember very well paying 3 $112 on an Italian cargo boat, third class, to go to London. So the boat went to Genoa.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And for maybe it's an Italian cargo boat.
From,
Where else would it go?
from Port of Spain to
From
Genoa?
Port of Spain to Genoa.
And what cargo did it have?
All sorts of things. It's a cargo boat.
Okay.
Carrying all sorts of things from Trinidad.
Because people used to talk about the banana boat in the Caribbean. It wasn't a banana boat, was it?
Well, the cabin in which they put me down in the hole, I really didn't see any bananas there. But that's beside the point. The point is, the boat took me to
Genoa.
To Genoa. From Genoa, I took a train to Calais.
Uh-huh.
From Calais, the ferry to Dover. From Dover to Southampton, and from Southampton to... It took me 14 days to... 14 days.
And that's strange because London was the center of empire.
Of course it was.
And yet there wasn't a... Now it's harder to get to Genoa than London from Trinidad. But in your day, it was direct to Genoa.
Oh, no, well, it all had to do with the price. You pay the lowest price you probably could get to reach London, and that was the consideration, really. But when I went there, I worked at several jobs. I worked as a laborer on a building site. I worked as an electrician mate. I worked as a clerk at the London County Council, and so on. I spent 9 years there working and studying, working in the day and studying at night, or working at night and studying in the day.
At that time, V.S. Naipaul would have been up in London, but I don't know if you ever would have crossed paths.
No. I wouldn't have been in that class.
Yes. He was at Oxford and writing with the BBC.
Sure. And the first connection I had with Eric Williams himself was that after the elections, he came to the Colonial office. I think that's what they called it, the Colonial office in London. And he came there. It's a place where Trinidadians got together and so on. And he had this meeting. And I had just gone there a year before, I think. And he was talking about unity and equality and all that sort of thing. And I, as a novice, got up and said, but Prime Minister, excuse me. You talk about equality and you talk about fairness and you talk about getting rid of corruption and so on. But I know of a man by the name of Mustafa Ibrahim, a student, who was studying law in England. And he got up a second class at the bar. And he applied to the office here for a job. And he was refused. Yet you're the son of your minister, Solomon. I think it was Frank Solomon, actually.
Right.
Who got a third class, applied for a job here, and he got a job. Where is this equality that you're talking about? And I was booed down by the rest of the audience, who were all P&M fanatics.
Well, that is interesting on a number of levels. At a general level, I think for the international audience, they might not be aware of some of the dynamics you're talking about, which is the incidence of let's say discrimination, and we could say racism. I don't know if you'd want to use the word racism.
Oh, sure, certainly. As a matter of fact, there used to be little advertisement in the shop windows. Mm-hmm. That is how you found things. Little advertisement in the shop windows, and printed on a little card, and they would have put room for rent.
Yes.
No blacks, Irish, and dogs.
Right. Yeah, and that's in London. But now what I'm talking about is in Trinidad, because what I think what you're referring to about your Muslim friend as opposed to Patrick Solomon's son. And Patrick Solomon in the West Indies, it's not just black and white, and especially in Trinidad, you have Indians. And the Indians are divided into Hindus and Muslims and Presbyterians, and then and the Christian, and then even among the blacks, you have the darker skinned, the lighter skinned, what we call red in Trinidad, and then you have the in Trinidad we have the people who are from the other islands.
Then we have the Coco Payol.
Coco Payols, you have the Portuguese, you have all these people. So when you're talking about Patrick Solomon's son, this would be one of the, what Lloyd Best called the Afro-Saxons, one of the sort of lighter skinned Afro-Saxon elite.
Yes.
And his son, you're saying, was preferred over the sort of poor Muslim.
Somebody who was more qualified.
Right.
Yeah.
A poor Muslim from the countryside who was more educationally qualified was denied the job.
The Mustafa Ibrahim of which I speak became a judge in Trinidad. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
And this is one of the amazing things about the colonial and decolonization period, that whenever I speak to people abroad about it, during the decolonization period, when we formed our own state, so many people from poor backgrounds, rural, such as yourself, a poor son of a farmer, became prime ministers, judges, leaders of industry, leaders of, there was a lot of opportunity opened up by independence, because we had to form a new nation out of our people.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly. And a lot of people who migrated, because, I have this debate with my own family who migrated. I say, there would have been more opportunities for you had you stayed in Trinidad than when you migrated to Toronto or New York. Eric Williams used to very often criticize people who went to New York and say, you all could go clean toilets in Brooklyn if you want. Or,
Well, the opportunities in Trinidad were very limited.
Right.
And people left so that they could have opportunities for growth and for development and so on. For example, had I stayed in the rural village of St. Julian, I would have followed my father and my mother into peasant farming.
Right.
And I would have grown crops which were like them and take it to the market and sell it in order to merely survive.
Right, but then with independence and the new demands for a civil service, for an industrial class, for a political class,
opened up a lot of opportunities. I agree with you.
Yes, because even Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, who we'll talk about later, became Attorney General. He went to school with he taught at school with my mother, as in the 50s, and their paths diverged. If I look at my mother's classmates, many of them became very, very prominent people in the state, whereas she had a more or less humble existence migrating.
Oh, the colonial peoples were very bright, very intelligent, and once they had the opportunity, they were able to develop to all sorts of professions.
Yeah, and a very interesting thing of your time in London too. You mentioned so many things you did, the electrician, but you also were an actor.
Well, the strange thing about that is that, as I told you, I went there to study law. I had absolutely no idea of becoming a politician, and when I was working as a laborer and an electrician mate and so on, I'd work for long hours and I'd be very tired, and there's no opportunity to study at all. It is when I got a job at the London County Council as a clerk in the housing management department, I remember. I was now beginning to work from 8 to 4:30 or whatever. And I did not have the money. I needed £120 to deposit at Lincoln's Inn so that I can be a member of the Inn and become a lawyer. But not having the money. I began to save up the money and so on. But now I was working from 8 to 4:30, and my hero at the bar uh, was, the name will come to me. He was a tremendous orator.
Yes.
Uh, um,
A
Sir
British lawyer.
Edward Marshall Hall.
Okay.
Sir Edward Marshall Hall.
Right.
He was a tremendous orator at the bar. I remember him saying that all of us lawyers are actors, and the courtroom is our stage. The only difference between us and professional actors is that we write our own script. That's the kind of admiration I had for him.
Yes.
So I decided that what I would do is I would go to drama school, not to become an actor or anything like that, but to go to drama school to have a command over the language, to develop oratorical skills, such as Sir Edward Marshall Hall.
And you were in two international films.
But that's how it happened, you see, because I went to drama school. I went to drama school for 2 years.
Right.
And after drama school, I had a diploma in drama. But when you had a diploma in drama, the general thing was that there were agents,
yes.
a system of theatrical agents. And when a producer or director wanted somebody for a particular part, they'd go to the agent and said, you have somebody resembling this and that sort of thing. So I just went and took some photographs and handed it to an agent. And I began getting parts on British television, BBC, ITV or ITN, I think. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, but, ITN.
So that would go on for a while I'm at the London County
Also, you
College.
did a lot of TV as well. I didn't know that.
Yeah, quite a bit of them.
Okay. What sort of characters did you get in 1957?
Small parts. For example, I remember an Arab soldier.
Okay.
Probably my previous. All kinds of little parts.
But were they always like exotic parts, like an Arab or an Indian, or I would imagine so.
Yeah, because of my features.
Yeah. So you played foreign roles.
I began getting little parts and so on.
Right. Speaking roles.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I eventually saved the money. Was able to save the £120 which I deposited at the Lincoln's Inn.
Right.
I became a member of the inn. So whereas I used to study, work in the day and studying in the night, things changed.
Yes.
When in 1961, I got a part in a play at the Savoy Theatre in the West End. And it was called The Bird of Time, actually. I remember the name. And so I now began working in the night and studying in the day. And that play ran for the whole of 1961, from January to December 61. And by the time the play had finished, I had enough money to stay home. And I went to a place called Wiley's in Chancery Lane in London and rented all the books for the finals, because by that time I had already got through with the part one of the bar, and I decided I'd do the finals. I rented the books and began studying 18 hours a day. And the bar council there used to do the exams twice a year. I think in July and September or something. And I decided that I'll take the July exam. And I studied day and night. I would study. I did not go for lectures at the Inns of Court, because to do that, I would have had to spread my time over a year, and I would not have had enough money to do that. So I decided I'd cut it all short in 6 months, because that's how much money I had, and I took the exam.
But
and passed.
just to let people know about your film roles too, because people will be able to have access to
Oh,
this around the world. One was Man in the Middle with Robert Mitchum, right?
Man in the Middle with Robert Mitchum.
And what
Brigand
was
of
your role in that?
That was a play in which an American soldier stationed in India was charged with murder.
Right.
And the British, the army, decided they would send down a lawyer to represent him. The lawyer was Robert Mitchum.
Right. And your role was what?
I was one of the reporters who met him at when he landed in India and asked him all sorts of foolish questions, I imagine. But that was the role.
So you had a speaking role in that?
Oh, yeah.
And I know.
I was interviewing him.
And 9 Hours to Rama.
And in 9 Hours to Rama,
I've seen that online.
I played the part of a laundryman.
Yeah, and just for the viewers to know, it's a very interesting movie. It's about the assassin of.
It is about the assassination of Gandhi.
Yes.
And the lead role was played by a German actor called Horst Buchholz.
Right.
And
they put makeup on his face to look darker, did they?
Do all kinds of things.
Yes.
So while waiting to kill, to assassinate Gandhi, he was hiding out in a laundry or somewhere. And I played the part of a laundryman who was bringing messages from the conspirators to the killer, right? To the guy who was supposed to kill him. So that's the role I played. And that was with Horst Buchholz, as I said. The other one was a film called The Brigand of Kandahar, in which it concerned about fighting on the northwest frontier of India. Kandahar is a place, I think, probably in Afghanistan somewhere. And anyway, I played one of the rebels in that, one of the rebels fighters and so on.
Well, yeah, so that was, I mean, that must have been especially coming from a village in Trinidad and remote, and then going up to being in these international films while you're studying for law. That might have been quite an experience. Was it scary for you when you were doing it? Or no?
No, when you are poor and desperate, nothing is scary.
Right.
You do anything that is necessary in order to acquire the funds in order to complete your studies. And that was the frame of my mind.
That's quite amazing, because other people might react differently. So you had no insecurities. You had none. I'm just a colonial boy. I don't know anything. I'm in the big London. You had none of that.
No. It never frightened me. I had one objective, a very narrow objective, and that was to become a lawyer. And I needed to study to become a lawyer. But when I got through the bar exam, I remember that when I was working at the London County Council, I had applied for what is called a major county award. And it is an award that they used to give to students who wanted to study. And after I passed the bar, I somehow felt that I wasn't educated.
Yes.
And I called I had left the job at the London County Council, and I called them and asked them. I said, I remember making an application for a county award. I haven't heard from you. And they wrote back and said that quite to the contrary, we haven't heard from you. We wrote you and told you that we have granted the award. But I suppose in my study for the law and so on, I probably ignored everything else, you see.
Right, yes.
So they said, we are waiting on you to tell us that you have been admitted to university. Of course, I ran around and got into the City of London College, where they were doing the London degrees. And that's...
What I wanted to also look at too is now the fact that you stood up to Eric Williams, who was seen as a godlike figure in Trinidad, and you raised this very important point. Now, I'm going to have to take a little break here. So we're going to take a break. In fact, we are going to be continuing this conversation later, because this is going to be an extended conversation. But that is a very important point, the courage that it took. So we'll be right back after this.